Welcome to Life Unrestricted.
This is your show if you're sick of living a life controlled by food and exercise rules, and if you're ready to learn how to accept yourself and enjoy the heck out of life. My gig is about body image, femininity, self-worth, and resilience. Come on, let's walk side by side as we slowly step out of restriction misery and unlock our true selves.
Your host, Merritt Boxler, is a former national radio DJ, freelance journalist, speaker, and writer with a passion to make women feel good in their bodies. This is a show brought to you live from Switzerland.
Hey, lovely radicals. How are things with you? Look, whatever your answer to that question is, I gotta tell you something. Because I think I might not have told you for a few weeks, you are a badass. No matter whether you feel great or not so great at this moment in time, you are a badass. Are you aware of the sheer accuracy of this statement? I hope you are, because really, living in the world as it currently presents itself requires a remarkable amount of badassery. So much political instability, so many scary news, so much fear-mongering going on, and generally just the questionable state of humanity that we're in. It takes a lot to stay sane. These past few days, I've seen some lectures about why some humans interact the way they do on social media, which I bet you know is often extremely trigger-happy, very quick to lash out and judging literally everyone and everything that is not 100% aligned with what the person A thinks. And it certainly doesn't take much to verify this yourself. I mean, whenever I observe how people tend to interact in the comment sections, particularly if the post was controversial or offering a different perspective on something, I don't think there ever was a time when people were so quick to turn mean, so quick to troll, so quick to jump to conclusions, so quick to forget their own human nature. I'm repeatedly horrified and also saddened at how this whole communication thing is going down the drain. But I'm not just horrified and sad, I'm also sort of shaking my head at people, not really understanding how anyone could think interacting like this is helpful in any way or conducive to any sort of understanding of each other. How can we wish for a more peaceful world when we're so ready to attack everyone who does not agree with us 100%? I think the way we interact as a global community on the internet is very telling and symbolic of where we stand as a species. The divides get deeper, the fear rises, and with all the fear-mongering going on everywhere, that certainly makes sure that people are more and more quick to just hate. And I gotta say, that doesn't make me very optimistic. But I'm also super happy to see that there are more and more people who are fed up with this as well. People who remember their own humanity and focus on bringing us back together rather than driving us further apart. And that is what makes me even more sure of what I'm doing here, because if I'm sure of something, it is that we cannot fight hate with hate. Not with anyone else out there, not with anything else out there, and not within ourselves. And I'm not saying that everybody out there is worth your time, dear one, but I'm saying that rather than hating them, take care of yourself. Remove yourself, and don't let yourself get sucked down that vortex of bad energy, fear, and hate, because it most often brings out the very worst in people. What I've noticed in myself is that the more I start looking within, the more I am willing to sit in the discomfort of my own internal contradictions, the more I am able to handle cognitive dissonances that I'm faced with in the outside world. I'm turning into a pretty good listener, And I gotta say, that can bring up a lot of discomfort in myself, especially if it is something I'm not agreeing with, or if it brings out something that was a trigger for me. For example, for a long time, I was internally unwilling, almost unable to listen to men who were victims of domestic violence, or listening to men who experienced the horror of false rape allegations from women. I was so stuck in my own past that I was internally thinking, come on, this is not half as bad, and we women have it 10 times worse, and you're such a tiny minority, that doesn't count. I was shutting down because I felt that women deserved to be listened to more, basically. So I was invalidating people's stories internally because they made me feel uncomfortable. It made me feel uncomfortable to see that, yes, while there are many women who experience terrible violence and mistreatment and sexism, there also are very mean women out there. We are not all saints. I kind of was very reluctant to hear that. And I had to realize that it doesn't matter who has it worse. I had to see that there is just not either or, but and out there. And I think that someone who's willing to share their experience deserves an open ear. Their suffering doesn't lessen mine, and mine doesn't lessen theirs. We all want to be heard. And so when people try to shut someone down for speaking about their experience, then we shouldn't be surprised that we only radicalize the other side in their own assumptions. And this only leads to further war. So yes, I think we can all do better at listening. And I always remind myself of that too, especially when I want to jump to conclusions, simply because that would be easier for me, of course. And I guess with age comes a certain amount of wisdom, because the older I get, the more I rely on a great quote by Napoleon Bonaparte that says, "Never ascribe to malice that which is adequately explained by incompetence." Yeah, some people say stuff because they don't know better. Some people say stuff with the best of intent. Some people don't acknowledge their own pain and lash out at others. So I tend to look more for that, for the incompetence or the ignorance part of things, rather than assuming malice, true malice. It's easier to keep peace in my own mind if I do it like that. And I find that usually my worst assumptions that I might jump to don't prove to be right anyway. Once I am willing and able to inquire where the other person is coming from, I can often see that their point is valid too, or at least understandable. So no, I don't think being on the lookout for other people's mistakes and looking for fights is conducive to any sort of conflict resolution. My best bet so far has been to stick with kindness or a kind attitude as often as possible. And if the other person cannot do the same thing for me, I can set boundaries like a badass, because it is up to me to take care of my own well-being. And I think an important part of my well-being is staying open to other people. That's why I am basically against labeling myself anything. Unnecessary labels divide people further and further. So, as we can see in the world, be it the world of food or really any other stage that life is being lived, people nowadays, especially on the internet, seem to shut down to the possibility to even listen to someone who is not in their own peer group. And that's not what I think will ever bring any sort of peace. It's not us versus them all the time. But it's certainly easier to think that, because not agreeing with someone can be very uncomfortable, especially when you're faced with someone who has a totally different belief than you, someone who has a completely different experience in life. And just because we as humans tend to want to avoid any negative feelings doesn't make it okay to judge and hate on people whose views differ from our own. The path that I like to see myself on is solving the war within myself first and figuring out and sitting with my own contradictions first, because blaming the world is not going to help my personal growth at all. And believe me, I'm as much a student at this as you, dear radical, because self-acceptance and self-inquiry are truly radical acts. And it certainly isn't comfortable all the time. But the cost of avoiding negative feelings is so much higher than we might think. And I think I'm going to save my thoughts about that, about avoiding negative emotions and the cost of it, for another intro, because I kind of don't like how preachy I'm starting to sound. And who wants that? So again, just saying, I don't have anything figured out. I'm just learning alongside of you. And I love that we're on this meandering journey together. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for knowing. Thank you for supporting this show also. Be that by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, which I hope you will do in case you haven't already, because it really helps other people find this show. Or for even supporting this mission on Patreon. For those of you who would like to show this podcast some love in this way, please do. Please check out my page on the platform called Patreon. You can find it at patreon.com/lifeunrestricted, and you can make a donation there if you wish. And I certainly hope you are considering to do so. I'm infinitely grateful for your help in my mission to make women see another truth than the one they have been allowed to see. The truth that they're good enough as they are, and that by manipulating their bodies and wasting all their energy trying to look a certain way is a way of subscribing to the idea that they are inferior in their original version. In any case, I love you all for being on this journey with me, as I said, and I would greatly appreciate your support. So again, you can find my page on patreon.com/lifeunrestricted. Thank you. And this week on the podcast, it's my pleasure to talk to Jessica Setnik from Dallas, Texas. Jessica is an internationally known pediatric dietitian, an award-winning writer, and she is training professionals to work in the field of eating issues. She is definitely the best sort of woman to talk to about the origins of this world's body image problem and our issues with eating and weight. She's an icon in the eating disorder field as well. Her academic background is in human behavior, and with her master's degree in exercise physiology and sports nutrition, she has become an expert in dysfunctional and disordered eating, and she really has a unique ability to see what others might miss. As a certified eating disorder dietitian and dietitian supervisor, she has treated thousands of patients in the hospital and out, and she knows how to identify the underlying issues influencing patients' eating. Jessica is the author of The Eating Disorder Clinical Pocket Guide, as well as Eating Disorders Boot Camp, and she is a co-founder of iFeed, the International Federation of Eating Disorder Dietitians. In 2013, after 16 years of hospital and community work, Jessica closed her private practice to fulfill her mission of educating health professionals about our current understanding of eating disorders and thereby empowering them to confidently and competently help those who suffer from them. In all of her work, Jessica combines humor, science, and professional experience to help us all improve one of the key relationships in life, the one we have with food. Hi, Jessica. Thank you for being my guest today.
Oh, my pleasure. And I love the name, Life Unrestricted.
Thank you. You have been working professionally in the field of eating disorders and disordered eating, and you know a lot about body image work and why it is so important in this whole topic we're going to talk about. So to introduce yourself and let my listeners know a little bit of your backstory, why don't you take us back to the earliest memories you have of actually being in a body?
Oh, the earliest memories I have of being in a body, I'm actually confused in my mind about whether it's from seeing pictures of myself as a child or being told about myself as a child or actually remembering being me as a child. So the earliest memory I remember is the carpet in the floor where I lived when I was 4 years old. So I know I must have had a body if that's my first actual memory. But I remember being in kindergarten. I would say that's the first memory I have of being me.
And not self-conscious about the body yet at all.
Well, I don't remember that part, but what I do remember is that when I was in kindergarten, I used to get picked up late maybe not every day, but a lot. And this was back in the 70s where when your parents came to pick you up late, no one really worried about it. The teachers all left, and I was there by myself as a 5-year-old, which I think would never happen today. And I remember climbing up on the countertops in the classrooms and looking through the cupboards for something to eat. And I think that was probably my first effort to comfort or soothe myself with food.
Yeah, I relate to that. When you were growing up, there was nobody there who taught you to diet or to restrict your food?
No, not as a child. I put myself on my first diet when I was in my late teens in college. And I know there was talk about diets and diet soda and that kind of thing, as early as 8th grade. But I was a little bit protected from that in comparison to a lot of the kids growing up today.
Nowadays, it's become almost insane. I cannot imagine the pressure that a young girl and a young boy is under these days with all the advice and all the articles and the thin obsession. It seems like the world's body image is severely damaged at this point.
Yeah. I do remember being in the orthodontist's waiting room waiting to get my braces tightened, and there were all kinds of sort of inappropriate magazines there as far as adult women magazines, and there was probably dieting information in there. And I do remember reading an article about a parent who was saying that their child was larger maybe than society expected, and people were commenting in public. And I remember being sort of sad for that person that people would comment.
What made you interested in the whole field of eating disorders, and especially with that depth that you went at it?
Well, it's, a lot of little things that I can look at in retrospect, but I used to subscribe to 17 magazine when I was younger than 17, and I read an article about a girl who had anorexia, but just sort of in the way maybe any article would, but it seemed to really resonate with me. And then later I went back and I was looking through some high school papers and cleaning them out of my mom's house, and I saw that I wrote a paper on eating disorders in high school. I took a class, which was an amazing class in my mind that they even offered this class. It was called Social Problems of the 20th Century. It was back in the 20th century. So Social Problems of the 20th Century. And so we talked about all different kinds of issues that you probably don't really talk about in any of your other classes. Compulsive gambling, I remember, just different things like that. And I wrote a paper on eating disorders at that time. So I know there was some kind of interest there. I definitely didn't know at that time that it would become my career, because I really didn't know what kind of career I would have. When I went to college, I wanted to go to business school so I could be a CEO. And then when I realized that you have to start at the bottom, didn't sound so good anymore.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what I was going to do. And I just took sort of the core courses that you have to, that everyone has to take. And the ones I was taking seemed to clump up in the anthropology department. So I thought, okay, I can get a degree in anthropology, but I don't know what I would do with that degree as far as a career. And so I took nutrition as an elective because one of my friends told me it was an easy A. And as soon as I started the class, I just fell in love with it. I remember my teacher's name, Rita Herskovitz. I just remember telling my mom on the phone, "It's so fascinating, Mom. It's all about what happens when food goes inside your body. It's amazing." And I just thought, this is what I have to do. And so I continued taking classes. In the only classes you could take in nutrition were in the nursing school. So I was able to combine that into my degree in anthropology. And so I graduated with a degree in human biology, knowing I would go on to get a master's degree in sports nutrition, because I thought that was a great way to have a career and sort of follow my interests. Well, once I got to graduate school, someone said, I think for what you want to do, you need to become a registered dietitian. And so I looked into that and started that path. And then during that process, it was about 3.5 years of graduate school, I realized that it was more of an interest in the psychology of eating rather than sports nutrition itself. And so even though the psychology of eating and eating behavior and why we choose the things that we choose before they even get to that part about what happens inside your body, that was so fascinating to me because it used my anthropology skills, the whole idea that we're descended from people who learn survival skills, even if they seem dysfunctional now. I think that that's important in all areas of nutrition and dietetics. But at that time, really the only area where it was sort of, I'm using my finger quotes, allowed to talk about it was in the field of eating disorders. So full circle, I ended up back in a specialty area of nutrition, helping individuals with eating disorders.
Interesting. What an unusual coupling of study fields. I love it. Anthropology coupled with nutrition.
Well, I only know 2 other dietitians who have one who has a bachelor's in anthropology like I do, and then one who went back and got a PhD in anthropology. And I feel like it fits together so well. So it doesn't seem like, wow, it should be so unique, but it is very unique, and it brings a different perspective that I think is why some of my seminars and teachings have kind of resonated so much with other people who are working in the eating disorder field, because it really does make sense.
Yeah, no doubt. What did you learn about people's behavior with food, generally asking?
Well, I have to tell you, I didn't learn a lot in school. That was more like jumping through hoops and taking the right courses. But what I learned really was, once I got out into the working world. But I can tell you, really, my undergraduate in anthropology, what I brought with me into the working world is that we humans develop to survive, and we are descended from the people who were able to adapt and survive. So when you look at nutritional anthropology and why perhaps we eat the things we eat, it gives you the opportunity to say, even though this is a dysfunctional relationship with food now, it must have been functional at some point, either, from an anthropology view, macro, it was functional for us as human beings in the past, as a tribe. But on the micro level, you can then say, well, this behavior that this individual person does must have been something they needed to survive along their own path. So what I learned from anthropology is that smart people don't do dumb things. And so you can apply that on the macro level, that as a society, as a tribe, we developed eating behaviors that were needed for survival in the past, even if they may not be needed anymore. You can also apply it on the micro level, that an individual who is doing something dysfunctional with their eating may have needed that same behavior as a survival skill in the past. And we sometimes perpetuate things beyond their usefulness.
Yeah, as an emotional survival skill rather than a physical, right?
Sure, absolutely. A survival skill could be in response to a change in brain chemistry due to stress. It could be in response to food insecurity. There are so many different triggering things in the world that can make us respond on a subconscious survival level rather than a conscious, this is what I consciously want to be doing with my food level.
Yeah. What I loved is that you said smart people don't do stupid things to survive. And I believe in the theory that all of us have our stories and our adverse childhood experiences, and that we all did what we could and what we knew how to help ourselves.
I agree with that. We're all wounded in childhood, and anything less than nurturing feels traumatic as a child because you don't know if you're going to survive. And yet people are very, very resilient and survive very adverse circumstances. But those circumstances create imprints on our brains and affect our brain chemistry. And what I find very interesting about humans and our tendency to be optimistic is that I hear over and over and over again people say things like this. oh, that happened so long ago. That's not important anymore. And the response in my mind that we all should be giving is, no, actually, the longer ago it happened, that means the younger you were when it happened, which means the more of your development occurred as a consequence of that incident. So I might say, oh, those times when I was in kindergarten and I was alone and hungry and, felt abandoned, even though I wasn't, but that was how I felt as a child and looking for food. Yeah, that happened almost 40 years ago. So you could say it's not affecting me anymore, but I believe instead that more of my development occurred around those experiences because I was so young when they happened.
Completely. The deeper the imprint, the longer ago it is. I believe that. Yeah. But we have a certain period in life where we feel safer denying all of what had happened or emotionally denying what happened. I mean, I remembered all of my horror stories, but I only remembered them on a rational level, but not emotionally. It was too painful to connect to them. And for a long time, I thought I was completely self-reliant. I don't need anybody. I have to be, independent at all costs. And I didn't realize that this was not a heroic badge of honor sort of thing, but how deeply afraid I was of love, because I experienced love as being the solution to my problem as well as the very thing that put me in danger. So
yeah, it's heartbreaking. And I can say, as grateful as I am to have had, to the outside world, a safe, nurturing childhood, that you get in a different kind of double bind, which is, would it hurt my mom's feelings to know that being late to pick me up to kindergarten really affected me, And so you become like, you want to minimize it as well because it wasn't so bad, that kind of thing. And so, it's tempting to say it wasn't so bad. I mean, eventually someone did come to pick me up. So, why would I make a big deal about it? There's so many survival skills and coping skills, or I guess we should say defense mechanisms that we use to sort of make ourselves feel okay about things that felt when really we're entitled to feel however we feel. But we've grown up in a society where sometimes it seems like our feelings hurt other people, which is really not true, but we want to try to minimize our blame of other people when we know they weren't really trying to hurt us.
Yeah.
And that's a different point of view from people who really genuinely were trying to hurt us. So I think it's, it works both ways with the minimization.
And we've all been manipulated or conditioned to some extent. Some people have been judged for their emotions because their parents didn't know how to handle their emotions, so they couldn't be heard or seen for who they truly were. And as kids, what we do is we think it's about us and that we are flawed and not lovable. And
see, and now you're talking like an anthropologist, because I believe that if you want to understand your eating behaviors, you have to look 2 generations back at least, because the way your parents were raised with food is the way then they raised you with food. And so none of us 2 generations back is immune. I mean, there is no one on earth that is not descended from someone in the past 2 generations that either lived through a world war, the Great Depression, a refugee situation, the Holocaust. We all are descended from someone who lived through a food insecure time. And that's why we were all told we had to eat everything on our plate, because even though we knew there would be food at the next meal, the people who were raising us had had experiences where there wasn't anything to eat at the next meal.
What I see in all of our stories is a lot of fear. In our ancestors' stories, in our stories, and of course we don't know anything else but to pass on our patterns that we adopted from our parents, so we pass them on. So
sure, even if we hated it, hated it when it was happening to us, it still feels like love, because the person who's giving us those rules really does think that they are helping us.
Exactly. And then we choose partners that maybe, mentally or emotionally or even physically abuse us, or that are simply unavailable. And then we feel that desperation and that begging for love again, just as we did.
Oh, now you're talking about Imago theory. I love Imago theory.
Yeah, come on, let us all have it.
Okay, so I read about Imago theory in some books by Harville Hendrix. I think he's the one that developed it. But the idea is that we are hardwired by our childhood to grow up to be attracted to people that remind us of our primary caregivers, because we try to have the same situation recreated but with a different outcome. So if you had a parent who is emotionally unavailable, you may seek emotionally unavailable partners but try to create a different ending. So if I get the emotionally unavailable man to tell me he loves me, then I win. But the truth is, I couldn't ever heal the wound of, let's say, having an emotionally unavailable dad. So it never actually works. But it's very depressing when you think, oh my God, I have no control over who I fall in love with. This is terrible. But then he sort of reveals that the solution is not to change who you are, because that's not possible, but to make it conscious so that you can say out loud, for example, when you, sleep in a different room, I feel abandoned, even though I know you're only going to sleep in a different room because your snoring bothers me. So here's what we need to do. Before you leave to go in the other room, give me a big kiss and say, I love you, and I'll see you in the morning. And that will help me not make up in my head that you left because you don't love me anymore, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And that we only recognize as love the thing that we did experience as love when we were kids. And the question is, was that really love? And for a lot of people, it really wasn't. At best, it was something very conditional. And for me, I can only speak for myself, but maybe it helps for someone who is listening, that this really is a thing, that disorganized attachment is when you experience someone being, the source of love and the source of the greatest danger, maybe even threat for your life at the same time. Then you don't really know whether you want to run towards it or whether you just should freeze and hide because the danger was in the very person you loved. And then you recreate the same sort of thing. And all I had in mind was, I never want to date someone like my dad because he wasn't there at all. And then what I didn't realize was that I attracted very nice men, but immediately after 2 or 3 months of being in love, I found them incredibly boring, or I found some other reason to push them away, or I fell in love with someone else. And of course, I guilt-tripped all over myself, thinking what kind of bitch I am to push someone as precious away. But I didn't realize what was happening, that as soon as real intimacy started to happen, after the first crazy infatuation goes away, then I got afraid. Because what if I get hurt again like that? And I started to come up with all sorts of strategies, unbeknownst to my rational mind, of course. I didn't realize that. But I did all sorts of things to push them away. And I even broke up with them. And when they left and they had new relationships, only then did I feel all the pain and I wanted them back. And I never really learned to trust my feelings because I didn't get them. I'm like, I was in love and then I really, really wasn't. And now I'm missing. What the hell is going on?
Oh,
yeah,
Merritt, we have so much in common. My dad was definitely the love of my life as a child, and he died when I was 12. And that was the exact same lesson I learned too, was don't attach, because even if someone says they'll never leave you, they don't know. They don't know what kind of curveballs life throws.
Exactly. And I had the same experience with my mother as well, who was an alcoholic, an addict, totally unpredictable, probably also had some sort of her own complex trauma, of course. And so she was completely unpredictable and violent as well. And she died when I was 14. So it was really, I was so conflicted about my own feelings of, I love her, I miss her, I want her, and I wish she would die because I cannot survive like this. And forever I felt so guilty because there was a part of me that wished for her to die. And when she died, there was that part of me that felt maybe I killed her. You know, all these conflicting emotions that I later in life carried out by being hard on myself, being overly critical of myself, by simply not relating to myself as a female human being, by not really connecting on an intimate level with intimate partners, and by attaching to the whole narrative our culture has of people only being lovable when they're thin. So I got lost in that. But what I really lost way back was myself. And I think that happens to many people, that whatever hurt they have, they might hide or cope with their distress by not eating, by overexercising, or by eating too much, or by drinking, or by gambling, or by engaging in risky sex behavior, whatever it is. And I have so much compassion for that. All I want is for people to be okay and look at themselves. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Where am I hurting? What did I not get? But instead, we usually beat ourselves up. I love that point of view.
Yeah. And I think the number one thing to be able to look at your own behaviors is to take the shame away. And that's what we as the helping professional can do. We're a witness to someone's pain, and to be able to sit and hear someone's behaviors that they think are, the most horrible, shameful things that they do, to be able to say, well, you're a smart person, so no, I don't think you do those things because you're self-destructive. I think you're doing those things because somehow they've saved you or helped you in the past. And so even if they feel destructive now, we need to look at the backstory.
Yeah. If we pile shame on top of all the injury, then it will only exacerbate the problem. And that's why I also, on a different level, hate the fact that there's so much weight stigma going on in our world, because we add shame and punishment to the initial injury, and thereby we drive people into even more shame and isolation, which makes the problem worse. And I don't get it why people justify the fact that we can just freely judge other people's bodies and eating behaviors or whatever behaviors. We just go on and judge everybody. And I think we're on the wrong track with that.
Well, but it's Cartman's triangle, isn't it? I mean, you can either be the victim, the persecutor, or the rescuer. And if we've been a victim, then our temptation is to think that it's the persecutor who has the power. And so we take the opportunity to be the persecutor whenever we can because it feels more powerful.
Yeah, I relate to that. But I think there's another position. When I recognize that I don't have to be the victim, and that all I really need to do is to work on myself and my own hurt, then suddenly a lot of my judgments fell away. And the ones that I still have, which of course all of us have judgments, I can kind of observe them and pull them back and question them. But I can kind of observe myself judging stuff, people, movies, whatever, and I can just be aware of that and ask myself, is this a proper judgment? You know what I mean?
Well, but I think you can go even deeper with judgments. I think our judgments are mirrors. I think if I judge someone, let's say I'll just make something up. Okay, I judge someone who dyed their hair pink, and I say, oh, they dyed their hair pink. That's so ugly, or something like that. That says something about me and my fears. Maybe I secretly want to dye my hair pink, but I'm scared people will judge me. I mean, it's like a boomerang or a mirror, I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you. That's to me what judgments are, is we develop them in a sense as a way to protect ourselves. But why do I need protection from that? Unless it's something that I have a danger of falling into.
Yeah, we're basically saying the same thing. I was working with Byron Katie, and I was able to see what my judgments were about. And that's what I meant when I said question them. Is like, why is this triggering me?
Yeah.
Does this resonate with my deep fear? Does this resonate because there's a part of me that I don't want to acknowledge? Is this something that I desperately want to have? Is this my jealousy, like I hate her for her being better? What is it? And I think we would all be much better off if we were a bit more honest and closer to our own psyche, and recognizing what all of this represents and how much we project, So what did you, in all of those years working with eating disorders, Are there some commonalities that popped up for you in terms of emotional regulation and everything?
Well, I guess the number one thing that every person who eats experiences and maybe doesn't realize they're experiencing is that food is a mood-altering chemical. I mean, everyone knows that. You know you're in a grouchy mood and then you eat something and you feel better. But we don't talk about it in our society as being a mood-altering chemical. And then the compensatory behaviors that, we associate with dysfunctional eating, those are all mood-altering chemicals too. Over-exercise, cutting, self-induced vomiting, laxative abuse. I mean, all these things change our body chemistry and our brain chemistry. So it's not just a bad choice or a bad behavior. It's really, that's where it becomes that survival instinct. It's self-medication. And so I think that's the consistent thing that applies to any person with dysfunctional eating behaviors, is that they're mood altering. The question is not, why is someone throwing up after meals? They're not throwing up after meals to get high. The question is, why does someone feel so badly after meals that throwing up helps them feel better?
And what did you find out about that?
Oh, that's different for every single person, because that has to do with the messages that person received or has internally about what it means when you eat, or what it means when you eat certain foods, or what it means when you eat a certain amount of food. Those are distressing thoughts for some people. And so to alleviate the distress, they sort of maybe experiment, you might say, with different behaviors, and, usually settle on one or more that actually help manage their brain chemistry and provide a genuine sense of relief. Even if when they wake up from the trance later, they regret the behavior, in the moment, the behavior seemed like the only option.
Do you think there are people that suffer from that sort of bulimia where the cause is simply our diet culture's messages and all the images and the articles and our idols out there? The thin obsession is the only cause of their behavior?
Okay, so now you are asking me kind of a big question, which relates to the dysfunctional eating behavior origins model that I created. I believe that there are many, many, many conditions that we call bulimia. There are many conditions that we call anorexia. Because we're naming these conditions only based on the symptoms, it's like saying 3 people are coughing, they must all have the same condition. It's not even close to correct, right? We could have 3 people coughing and one could be choking and one could be could have tuberculosis and one could have a sore throat. I mean, to say that 3 people don't eat enough to survive and they all have anorexia and it's the same condition is absurd.
Right.
So in my model, I believe there are biologically based eating disorders. There are addiction-based eating disorders. There are stress and trauma-based eating disorders. And there are society and learned behavior-based eating disorders. So I would say, yes, there are some people, I believe, that use compensatory behaviors after eating. And it is simply, which it's not the right word because it's not simple at all, but it is as a result of their learned behaviors. This is what their peer group is doing. This is due to, let's say, the pressure of having to weigh in for their sport. And they don't have the same disorder because it's not necessarily a mood-altering behavior for them. They may feel horrible and disgusting afterwards. They do it for sort of an external reason. And I think that's a different issue and needs a different kind of treatment than someone who genuinely feels much better when they use a compensatory behavior, because they may have an underlying biological condition such as depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress that requires its own treatment. And so just to, let's say, lock a bathroom after meals so they can't throw up doesn't actually treat the underlying condition. So I do think it's more than one disease that we call bulimia.
Yeah. And you mentioned treating the disease. So if locking the bathroom, just to use your phrase of wording, doesn't help, then what do you think gets to the root of the problem?
Oh, well, I guess that's what counseling is for. And, to really say, how does it feel after you eat? Can you put it into words, or can you draw a picture? Can you express it through art or through a poem? How do we access someone's feelings? Because that's where the information is. because someone might consciously, cognitively say, I don't want to throw up after meals. But nevertheless, if they're not able to just put that into action, then there's something deeper going on. And what we can bring to the table with our words is really just the tip of the iceberg. We have to somehow access what's really going on. And sometimes it may be being present with someone during that process and to say, I'm willing to be here with you during this process to try to help you understand it, instead of saying you're bad, you throw up after meals, we're going to lock the bathroom, or we're going to punish you, but instead to say, I'd like to actually go deeper with you into this rather than trying to avoid it.
Wow.
And that's hard to do. That's hard. It's hard to be a witness to someone's pain.
Yes, it is. But it's also very gratifying because there is a change in the energy when someone feels seen. I experienced it on both sides, and I think it's a very, very powerful, also a form of secure attachment, if you will, because there is someone that is not going to leave. Whether you get angry or whether you cry or whether you have resistance, whatever you do, the person is not going to leave. And that's basically what we all needed when we were kids, right?
Yeah.
What I often hear is that it's so crucial to recognize disordered eating and possibly eating disorders as early as possible. And that makes 100% sense, of course. And it also leaves me with a slight feeling of despair because I'm going to be 44 years old. And for more than 20 years, not even I had a clue that I was doing something wrong because I was trying to, as you said, self-soothe, and I was trying to be like everybody else said I had to be and be as conforming as I could to society's ideals. So what are your thoughts for people who maybe have spent their lives living with disordered eating or some sort of eating disorder?
Yeah, I don't agree with that statement, not that you made, but that's out there, that the earlier you catch an eating disorder, the better, prognosis that person has. Because I've seen adults where, first of all, when you're trying to ask someone who is, let's say, 12 years old to have insight into their behavior, forget it, right? But if you're asking a 44-year-old woman, I'm just using your example, but it certainly could be a man, to have insight into their behavior, you have a much better chance of getting some information that is helpful and useful. You also have probably someone in front of you who possibly has participated in therapy, so they're developmentally more able to go there, in finger quotes, wherever they need to go. And they're also prepared a bit in a therapeutic relationship. So no, I've absolutely seen, I'm thinking of an example of a patient I worked with, I should say, that was 13 when her eating disorder started, and she had been overeating and throwing up every day since 13 years old. And when I met her, I think she was in her 50s, and she was really just talking about her eating disorder for the very first time. She was willing to go to a psychiatrist and get an assessment. She got on appropriate medication. She was willing to follow my suggestions. And now she's doing fantastic. And she's not throwing up anymore. She's not binge eating anymore. As far as I'm concerned, she's in remission. And that happened over the course of, I would say, maybe 6 months to a year of good treatment.
I think for me, it was wonderful to hear that you don't believe in that statement, because that really bothered me and made me sort of like, oh my God, what if I can't get rid of this? Because this habit has been going on for all of my life. So I'm like, oh no, what if it's not possible for my brain to create a new pathway?
No, I don't believe in that at all. It's entirely possible for your brain to create a new pathway. My grandfather learned to do Sudoku when he was 98 years old. So I don't think that that's ever something that can't be done. But I do think that in some cases, it's very important to consider psychoactive medication, because if you do have a habit, it's challenging to change a habit. We know that. But if it is something that's more than a habit, if it's, a brain chemistry altering, then someone might benefit from medicine that helps balance the brain chemistry. So then you're just looking at the behavior as a habit rather than as something that someone literally needs to use as self-medication.
Yeah. And to tie it back to what we were talking about before, I think for all of those who are recovering, and we are all recovering from something, as I love to say, all we need is some person or a therapist or a counselor or a dietitian, whatever, someone that can create that sense of secure attachment with us. Only from there, we are able to share and then to jump beyond ourselves and try new things. That's the very thing that we need to create a feeling of trust. And then we can learn to trust ourselves rather than the message that diet culture throws at us all day. You know what I mean?
Yes. And trusting is really hard. I always felt very honored if a individual would come to my office and be open to even considering trusting me. I'm a total stranger, and I would say that to my patients. I'm a total stranger. You don't have to do anything I say, but based on my experience, here's what I think might help. Is there anything of what I just said that you would consider trying?
Yeah. Where do you think that the trust comes in regards to our own body? And what I mean by that is that I think that the majority of women nowadays and all of those who are engaging in rule-based eating, whether they call that lifestyle, whatever, paleo, vegan, low-fat, raw, Atkins, whatever. Basically, we all don't trust in our own bodies anymore. And that somehow we'd rather be told what or how to eat just to be quote-unquote safe. Yet when we truly think about it, there's nothing more disempowering than having someone tell me what I should or should not eat just to feel on the safe side.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I remember yelling at the TV when I saw Oprah saying that now that she's with Weight Watchers, she's counting points, and it's so different from counting calories. And I just said to the television, like, no, Oprah, it's exactly the same.
That's the cardinal mistake she made in her life that made me question everything she did. Why does she talk about empowering women and everything, and she seems to be on the spiritual side, and then she engages in that? That was like discrediting all of what she did and just betraying her deep sense of unworthiness that she must still hold on to. And I thought she would be the woman with enough tools to dive into that. And I thought she had done that a while ago. So it was really disappointing and also sobering to see even Oprah is just an insecure human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's her childhood wound is, not being able to trust herself on that deep level. And we all learn it. There was a study done by dietitians where they gave 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds on different days, different size plates of macaroni and cheese. And the 3-year-olds, no matter what size plate they got, give them a small plate with a small portion, a big plate with a big portion, a medium sized plate with a medium portion. They ate the same amount and they wandered off to go play, the end. But the 5-year-olds ate a different amount depending on what size plate they had. So if they had a larger plate, they ate more. If they had a smaller plate with less, they ate less. And so we learned from that somewhere between 3 and 5, many children are learning to stop using our internal cues and start learning to eat based on external cues. And those external cues may be the size of the plate, or it may be when someone else says, oh, have a little more, you haven't had enough. There's lots of external cues out there. And the problem is that we are not always, as adults surrounding children, the safe external cue that we think we are. A lot of times, if we teach someone not to follow their internal cues, then they're a victim of the cues of whatever someone else suggests they eat. So even if I think I put the right amount of food on a plate for my child, when that child goes to a restaurant and has whatever amount that chef puts on that plate, that may not be the appropriate size. And I've taught that child to pay more attention to how much food is there than to pay attention to their own human body.
Mm-hmm. And along the way,
it's not ideal.
No, it's not ideal. And along the way, the narrative comes in that losing weight would make you feel happier, more desirable, or...
Well, sure, the beautiful people are happy. So therefore, if I'm not happy, I must not be beautiful.
Yeah. And that's what I got wrong for so long. I thought the beautiful people were happy. And it's simply not true. But it is a pervasive and a very seductive sort of narrative. And if that creeps into our subconscious, along with all the self-soothing that we might need, then, that's a perfect storm waiting to happen.
Well, and I think if you add into that also brain chemistry.
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, just that the perfect storm is not just the environment and self-soothing, but it's also the way that our bodies work. It actually feels rewarding when we do those behaviors.
Right. I get
Even
what
if
you
we
mean.
consciously regret them or consciously know they're not helpful.
Yeah, why else would a drug addict be a drug addict? Yeah, I see what you mean. So if you could, what would you want every woman to know about diet culture and fat phobia?
I'm overwhelmed with the question. I guess what I would want all people to know is that your body's on your side. And if you're going to trust your body versus your mind, always go with the body. You know, the mind is so easily manipulated. And I guess I would also say that it's all about someone making money off of you. And even though they may say they have your best interests at heart, the truth is if any one diet worked, it would put all the rest of the diets out of business. Oh, I guess, you know what, if I had to boil it down to one thing, I would tell all people that even if you do lose weight, if you do it through a diet, you will end up weighing more later. So diets are ineffective and actually cause weight gain, even if in the short term it seems like they help with weight loss. But then you know what? I feel like some people would still say, but that's okay. I only care about losing weight in the short term. I'm fine if I weigh more later. I'll go on another diet. So I guess that's why I'm overwhelmed with the question, because there's nothing I feel like I could say that could really make a dent.
Yeah, because they're not there yet and they're not ready to receive the message, you think?
Maybe because I feel outnumbered by all the messages that are out there. My small voice seems very limited and ineffective. But I guess that's why I'm writing a book.
Beg your pardon. I don't think your voice is small at all. So just saying that right here. And what are your experiences with encountering fat phobia in all those years you worked? Maybe inside of yourself, maybe inside of other personnel?
Well, I had a patient who was definitely the largest person I had ever known personally, and he had a binge eating problem, and, you know, we worked on it. At some point, he left my care, and I believe he had bariatric surgery, but, you know, if it was somewhat successful, it did not result in him having, I guess, what the world would consider a normal body size. And he eventually died of cancer because every time he complained of a symptom and went to one of his doctors, the response was always, you need to lose weight. It'll get better if you lose weight. And no one ever assessed for anything else. And so that is my terrible story of weight bias and how, you know, it led to this person's death. And I believe that probably all of those doctors believe in their hearts that he died because of his weight instead of the fact that he died because of negligent medical care.
Right. Everybody tells me that. When I was talking to Reagan Chastain or Virgie Tovar, even to Dr. Linda Bacon, when she told me that she would get a totally different advice from her doctor than her father got when he went to the doctor and he had a little more weight on his body. And the first advice he gets is lose weight. And they had knee problems. And they were genetic. She had the same knee problems, but she got physiotherapy and blah, blah, whatever it was, but it helped. And her father just got the stupid advice to lose weight.
Yeah.
And it didn't get helped. And there are so many stories that you wouldn't believe even. And I didn't really get help because I didn't look anorexic. So if I look healthy and I have a quote unquote societally acceptable body, then surely I can't be suffering, right?
Yeah, and that is just devastating to me because there are so many people suffering. And if I had one wish, I would wish that all medical care, eating disorder treatment, the whole thing would just become totally weight blind.
Oh, yeah, that'd be so good. But it seems like we're pretty far away from that.
Yeah, but at least in our field, at least in the eating disorder field, we could change that. And we haven't. It makes me mad that someone who has anorexia isn't eating enough to sustain life, that if their body weight happens to be over a certain amount, well, then they have atypical anorexia. Why is it atypical? They're still starving to death, right? Why is it atypical? Atypical anorexia to me is like maybe if you practice anorexia standing on your head on a unicycle while you play the violin or something. That's atypical. But atypical just because of your body weight, it's not atypical at all. It's the same disease. That just angers me so much.
Yes, me too. Me too. I was so confused because I couldn't categorize myself as by the usual diagnostic, criteria. Yeah. And then I just figured, well, I'm not sick.
Yep, that's right. So how dare we as a field criticize other areas of medicine for being weight biased when our own diagnostic criteria are weight biased?
Oh, yeah, right. That's powerful. And also I see in so many people nowadays it has become normalized to link exercise to eating. So everybody talks about earning food or having to burn it off.
Yeah, that's awful also.
And we never really think about the danger of this kind of thinking. It is all over the place.
Yeah, eating disorder dietitians do. It makes us crazy.
Yeah, please let us know how you approach people who, let's say, hide their weight fears behind obsessive exercise.
Well, it's two different things, right? I am active because I'm a human mammal. I have a body that likes to move. I eat because my body needs fuel. It's two totally separate things. My body needs fuel to grow and to repair and for energy. And so, yes, I do need energy to move my body, but it's not a direct relationship. I moved my body X amount, so therefore I need X amount of food. Or I ate Y amount of food, so therefore I have to move my body Y amount. It's just not that simple of an equation by any means. And so when we boil it down that simply, it's really a misunderstanding of how the body works. It's sort of like me saying, I breathe this much so that my hair grows this much. It's two different body functions that are not as related as we make it sound. But we humans like to control things. We like to crunch numbers. It makes us feel better somehow. It makes us feel in control. You know, we like to think that if I do everything right, then everything will turn out right. And we don't like to live in a world where sometimes you do everything right and things still go wrong. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes you totally mess up and things go right anyway. We don't like it because it feels out of control. We like A plus B equals C, and we want it to always be the same. But what we're doing when you talk about linking exercise and eating is we're taking 2 plus 2 and saying that equals 22. I mean, it looks correct. It seems correct, but it's really completely false.
And we all love ourselves. Some magical thinking, it seems.
Sure.
No.
Sure.
So in terms of what you do now, which is you train professionals.
Yes.
So clinical training, I suppose, rarely prepares therapists for all of the kinds of personal challenges.
Dietitians, doctors, nurses, none of us get enough training in dysfunctional eating.
Yeah, I think they're rarely prepared for the challenges that may arise and some of the scenarios that might happen as they treat people with eating disorders. So let me start with this question. What does the ideal eating disorder therapist have to bring to the table in terms of personal growth and supervision and stuff, you know, having healed from their own issues with body and weight?
I think that the most important thing is to look at individual care, because until we know what causes eating disorders and we have a cure, a vaccine, or a shot that you can get, until then, all treatment will have to be individualized, because we don't even know what the disease of an eating disorder is. We don't know, is it a hormonal disease? Is it a brain chemistry disease? Is it a brain functioning disease? Is it a disease of trauma? We just don't know. Is it an addiction? We don't know. And so we can't treat in a specific way. We have to treat individually to the patient. And sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. So I think humility is probably the best thing to bring to the table, and curiosity, a listening ear. I did a study on patients who had seen an eating disorder dietitian, and the number one thing that they all agreed on that the dietitian provided that was helpful was a listening ear. I think that as dietitians and also therapists, we have more time than doctors have in a clinical setting to actually get the patient's point of view. A lot of times patients have very valuable information about what's going on with them. Now, it may not always be accurate. Again, they may be adding up A plus B and getting Z, and we may get a different outcome when we hear the same information. But the ability to have enough time to sit and listen, I think is so valuable. And so to be humble and not bring your ego into the session. If a patient isn't improving, to not blame the patient, to say we haven't found the core of the matter yet, to be able to say, I think you would benefit from a higher level of care. I think our once a week outpatient visits are not adequate, without feeling like you as the provider is a failure because the patient isn't getting better. Sometimes eating disorders are much stronger than we all wish they were. So I think that humility and curiosity would be my most important qualities, because skills can be taught, but you can't teach someone to be patient or to be a good listener.
Yeah. And some people have told me that their own therapists and dietitians were on diets themselves and engaging in diet talk, and that was pretty disturbing to see that, that reinforced their own beliefs. So it was hard to heal.
Well, but at the same time, even though I'm not saying that that's ideal, at the same time, our goal is that our patients will be able to go into any setting where other people are doing whatever those other people do and be able to be internally guided as to what's best for themselves. So yes, while I agree that our treatment settings should be weight neutral and should be weight inclusive and diet free, and it's not ideal for a treater to be talking about their own diets, that would be the question I would say is, why is that even coming up in a session? If a treater has their own special diet, let's say for medical reasons or whatever reasons they're on a diet and they need to be doing that for themselves, why are they bringing it into the session? Because the session should be a place that focuses on the patient and helps the patient be resilient to the messages that they're going to get in the outside world.
Yeah, it was just that one therapist told me that at an eating disorder conference, there were water cooler discussions about diets going on, and how disturbing that was for her to hear. Like, what the hell?
Well, there's a dissonance there between what you're practicing in your own life and what you're telling other people. And I do think that comes across as insincere, and patients, in many cases can sense that. Sometimes you have to bring the elephant into the room. Let's say I happen to be Jewish. So let's just say it was Passover. I'm just making this up. And let's say I was keeping Passover. And so if I were having a meal with a patient, a therapeutic meal, and I said, I want to let you know it's Passover, and so I won't be eating bread, I'm telling you this so that you're not left to your own devices to make up in your head why I'm eating the way I'm eating, that kind of thing. I mean, sometimes it's appropriate to just say it so that you're not leaving someone questioning. But I do think that there are reasons why people follow certain diets. And, I would hope that it was for a medical reason rather than for weight loss. But
no,
I would definitely walk away if I heard people talking about, even in my own life, I don't really care for conversations at meal times about people's weight loss diets. I might say something like, what, this conversation is bad for my self-esteem. Can we talk about something else? Because, I don't like to hear about it either. My issue, I guess, is when someone hears those things and doesn't address it in the moment. That's not ideal.
It's kind of hard to address it when you're the only one. I had many experiences when I spoke up and said what you just said. Like, the minute I saw through all of that, I couldn't stand diet talk and weight loss talk and all the camaraderie around weight loss talk. I couldn't stand it anymore, and I was completely bored with it.
Yeah.
And I said what I thought, and I said, hey, could we change the subject? Isn't this getting boring? All women are talking about is this all we came here for, really? But it can get really lonely when you're the only one at the table and people look at you as if you were an alien, like, why, what? Then that's not so easy.
No, but if you turn it the other way and you think about yourself as an anthropologist observing this behavior in a tribe, right? Doesn't that make perfect sense why they would perpetuate it? Because it is lonely to be different. That doesn't make it wrong to be different, though.
Yeah, and if everybody's miserable and we're just doing this for bonding reasons and everybody hides their struggles and pretends
But that's the beauty of it, is that you can see that because the veil has been ripped off of your eyes. And so I'm thinking of my husband's holiday parties at his office where, I don't talk to anyone about what I do for a living, and I get to observe people saying things like, oh yeah, I'm on this no carb diet while they reach over me for a plate of pasta. So you can make it into sort of an expose, or I guess I think of it like an anthropologist with binoculars crouched behind a bush observing behavior. It doesn't have to affect you. In other words, you could have compassion for those people and what they're going through that makes them susceptible to those diets, rather than feeling like you have to do something about it. Because the issue to me is that, we change the world in our own ways. But if you're feeling vulnerable, that's not a position in which you need to take on the world. All you can do is share your own experience and say how it's affecting you, or leave the table. But if those aren't options, then absolutely put on your imaginary binoculars and observe society. Don't feel like you're a bad person for not bringing it up or speaking your truth, because not every scenario is a safe place to speak your truth. And it's just not. I mean, your feelings are pearls, and you don't share your pearls with people who are going to step on them.
Right. And at the same time, it's important to talk about our own struggles, I believe, because that might encourage someone else to question what they're engaging in. And you mentioned becoming less susceptible to diet culture's messages. Is there a way to become less susceptible for someone who maybe wasn't even aware how they were
Well,
bought
that's the
into
key
that?
right there, is awareness. So I can tell you, I know I'm a very sticky person, and I feel that that's a quality that many or most of my patients share, is that we're all very sticky. We're sensitive people, and when we hear something, we remember it. Whether we believe it or not, we take it in. So I'm thinking of, number one goal is to try to minimize those things that you encounter. So, for example, recording your television shows that you want to watch so that you can fast forward through the commercials that may be triggering for you. Not bringing celebrity gossip magazines into your home because they may have things that are triggering for you. But you can't eliminate everything triggering from your environment. But awareness is the key. I mean, the goal of advertising is not necessarily to, when you're driving down the highway and you see a billboard, let's say for plastic surgery, which we have many of here in Dallas, it's not for you to stop your car on the highway and spend a lot of time looking at the billboard. I mean, 10 people would crash into you. That's not the point of a billboard. The point is that as you drive by, it sort of goes into your mind's eye subliminally. And so something that would help you be aware of it would, let's say, perhaps to be a passenger in the car with a notebook. And as you drive down the path that you normally would drive to work, make a note of how many diet or body shaming messages you see as you drive down that path, so that you can be aware of it. And so that, let's say, before you get out of the car to go to work, you can, rip up the paper symbolically, or write an affirmation of, even though I've seen many messages demeaning my body is a gift from God, and I will cherish and take care of it today, or, whatever is meaningful to you. So in other words, instead of being a passive vessel for all these messages, to be very, I don't want to say provocative because that's not the right word, be very vocal maybe. So maybe every time you see a billboard driving by, as you drive by, you say, "That's a lie. My body is good enough." Maybe you say it out loud. Just something where you acknowledge that these messages are everywhere and that you are choosing not to absorb them. Or if you do absorb them, you find a way to eject them. And I know that for me, it's not possible to not see messages. And sometimes it's not even possible not to absorb or internalize them. But as soon as I notice, I can have a conversation with myself and say, here's why I know that is not true. That to me is the key, is awareness, is just not letting it seep in subconsciously. Or if we notice later that I'm body checking or I'm preoccupied with what I'm eating, then that person would then say, I wonder what's gone on in my day that could be leading to this. It's not because I'm a bad person or a weak person. It's because I've been triggered. Let me retrace in my mind what happened today. And was I triggered by someone saying I wasn't good enough in a work setting and now I'm blaming my body? Or was I triggered by not getting a good grade and now I'm blaming it on my body? Or was it an advertisement that I flipped through in a magazine? And trying to identify it and trace it back so that we are able to say these are external messages rather than these are the truth that I'm getting from my internal cues.
And you said it, advertisement can be very sneaky and very dangerous for our let's say, self-esteem. And I heard you talk about the dangers of advertisements. Would you care to share your thoughts on the dangers of advertisements?
Sure. Well, I think that if we all woke up every morning and were happy with the way we look, the whole economy of the world would collapse. If I didn't care about stinky armpits, I wouldn't buy deodorant. If I didn't care about shaving my legs, I wouldn't buy razors. If I didn't care about frizzy hair, I wouldn't buy shampoo and conditioner and blow dryers, right? We all purchase so many products to change or modify our appearance. If we all just woke up and said, I'm going to just be completely au natural today, and we pursued that on an ongoing basis, a whole section in the grocery store would collapse. A whole section in the drugstore would collapse. I mean, all the hair salons, right? So I'm not saying it's wrong to put on makeup or blow dry your hair if you like that. But I am saying that there is a vested interest in our economy in keeping us not liking ourselves, our situation, our bodies. It's an economic issue.
Mm-hmm. And what you said with the highway before was very striking because it made me realize the power of repetition. We might not think of one advertisement, let's say for the one you said about surgery, we might even think nothing of it, or think that we don't even see it, or we might even think that's ridiculous, why should this be? But over time, if the same message is repeated and repeated over and over and over again, and we're not aware, and it can, seep freely into our subconscious, after time, we end up with a belief that we are totally bought into.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a self-defense class I took with my stepdaughter probably 10 or 12 years ago, and they had this mannequin, and you would do the defensive maneuver that they showed you with your hand, and at the same time you yelled no. And I'm picturing myself driving down the highway from now on, and every time I see those billboards, I put up my hand and I say no. Mm-hmm. No, right. I will not allow you to enter my brain. No.
Yeah. I purposely look out for photoshopped faces and hands and nails and stuff on billboards. And it's after a while, when you really see it, you see the ridiculousness of it all. Yeah. Like, why don't we crave authenticity more? Isn't everybody else also getting sick of this whole pretense world where everything is amazing, yet everybody is miserable?
Well, and I think that's true. There are a lot of people who are sick of it and wish for a simpler life. But there's so many different areas you can think of. I mean, there's so many home remodeling magazines. And, for a while I thought, oh, well, I'll look at that instead of fashion magazines because that'll be healthier. But you know what? It's so unhealthy to be constantly dissatisfied with your own home.
True.
Right? And if I change this, and if I get a new kitchen, and if I remodel my bathroom, then I'll be happy. It's really much the same thing. There's gardening magazines, but again, it's the same thing. If everyone was happy with what they had now, they wouldn't need it. Look at car advertisements. Oh my gosh. The one that drives me absolutely crazy, I won't say the brand name because I bet it'll pop into your mind. Love. It's what makes a blank a blank. Love is what makes that car special. Jesus. Are you out of your mind? It's a piece of metal. What?
And so you, if you're not really aware of it, you might think, there's a ring to it. And if you question it, it doesn't make any sense at all.
No, and that's why it's so fun to be an anthropologist, because that's what we do. Part of anthropology is linguistics and how people use words. Like, love, it's what makes a ceiling fan a ceiling fan? Are you crazy? No, it's not. A ceiling fan is a ceiling fan because it has blades that make you cool when it turns on, right? Yeah. Love, it's what makes a sink a sink. No, that's not at all what makes a sink a sink. Water flowing through and a drain is what makes a sink a sink. But we hear it so many times in advertisements that now, that's what makes that car special is love. Right? So when you're an anthropologist, your whole job is to let go of your biases and observe something from a different point of view. It's so fun when you start to do it.
And you will only do it if you realize how easy it is to be seduced by those messages if you don't become an anthropologist, you know what I mean?
Yes, and maybe you should interview Karen Kretina because she's the dietitian I mentioned that has a PhD in anthropology. And I think her whole field of study is on advertising and how advertising portrays bodies and that kind of thing. So she could probably give you a wonderful interview on that.
Oh, I'd love to go into more depth on that. Yeah, that'd be lovely. As an extension to the whole thing, I want to quote something that Dr. Anita Johnson wrote. An eating disorder is like a weed. If you cut it off at the top, given the right circumstances, it can grow back. If you go down and clear out its roots, it can be eradicated. And I believe body image, as much as it is a personal issue, is much more critical to be healed on a social level. Because if we heal on a larger scale, then there's less chance that we might fall back, and it has become an epidemic that, 91% of all women are not happy with their bodies, which doesn't surprise us given the advertisement industry. But do you think it's a naive dream to heal body image on a larger scale?
A naive dream. Well, I guess I just don't know. I think that the key is internal resilience, because as far as making changes to the whole advertising industry, I guess I don't know. It's hard because, you have some advertising that tries to sort of be body supportive, but at the end of the day, it's still body negative because it's still trying to sell a product that changes your body. So that's challenging. I think it's more about each of us being resilient. In other words, why is liking or not liking your body, why is that even an issue? To me, if I don't like my couch, that doesn't mean I rip it up and shred it. Maybe I just accept it. Maybe I care for it because it's the only couch I have. I mean, I feel like there's a whole movement to love our bodies, and I don't know if that's actually realistic, not because you can't love your body, but because is that the key? Is love what makes a body? No more than love is what makes a sink, right?
No.
My body is my body. It's the way I travel through life. So I don't have to love it or not.
Yeah, there should be a more neutral appreciation for it.
That's what I would suggest. But I know there are a lot of people that will disagree with that. So that's
why?
Okay. Because they think you should love your body. Maybe it has to do with what is your definition of love.
Yeah. Maybe you love it for what it does, then it's okay. If you love it for how it looks.
What if I'm in a car accident and I can no longer use my body for the things that it used to do? So I don't love it anymore because I can't do those things?
I disagree. You could very much love it because you are still alive and it lets you still hug people. You can still eat and look. We have to break it down to a small
But maybe
level.
I can't. I mean, some people have ALS and they become trapped in their body. Do they still have to love their body? Maybe they're very angry with their body.
Okay, I rest my case. ALS is the worst, yeah. Jesus.
I'm just saying, for someone who does love their body, I admire that. And for someone who doesn't love their body, that's okay too. To me, it's more like, do I love the tree in my backyard? I don't know if I love it. It depends on your definition of love, but it's there and I get shade from it and I sit under it. And then sometimes I'm also annoyed by it because, all this pollen falls off it and gets on my car. So am I allowed to have mixed feelings about the tree? I think I should be allowed to have mixed feelings about my body as well. But regardless of my mixed feelings, I don't think that I should harm my body with a diet. I don't think I should cut my body with a razor blade. Right? I think I should care for my body regardless of whether on a certain day it's annoying me or not.
Yeah, that's a very good
I'm okay
point.
with agreeing to disagree. Everyone's entitled to their point of view. And I love everything that you've said. And I love that we have been able to have this conversation. So there's nothing that can take that away.
There should be more conversations like that. And before I ask you my final question, I want you to let everyone know where they can find you.
Sure. So my website is understandingnutrition.com. I teach an eating disorders bootcamp training workshop. The website for that is eatingdisordersbootcamp.com. I wrote a book called The Eating Disorders Clinical Pocket Guide, which is available at understandingnutrition.com. And I love to present. And if you were interested in me coming to do a training at your facility or presentation at your event, info@understandingnutrition.com is the place to reach me.
And what if someone is interested in your boot camp training and is not in your area?
Oh, well, then I have the perfect solution, which is Eating Disorders Bootcamp is available on CDs and also on MP3s. And part of the purchase price includes a 30-minute consultation with me on the phone to talk about it. That's how someone would get the CEU credit, is to have the 30 minutes on the phone with me. So anyone who's interested in doing the workshop and the audio version should go to eatingdisordersbootcamp.com. And also, now that I think about it, I do coaching sessions and supervision for professionals over the phone. So if any of your listeners had a situation they wanted to talk over, I'd be happy to talk with them personally.
Thank you. My final question would be, what would you like to be remembered for?
Well, I'm Jewish, and we have this phrase called tikkun olam, which is, I don't know the direct translation, but the idea is that we partner with God to make the world a better place. And so I'd like to be remembered for making an effort to make the world a better place, whether that's one at a time with an individual patient, whether that's through a training that has a ripple effect. I think that anything that I can do that can help one person and then maybe ripples to more people, I'd like to be remembered for any one of those situations.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. I really love what you do, the energy you bring to the table, the compassion and the way you listen. You're a really close listener. And that's the quality that we don't encounter all too much these days. And I really want to thank you for your time with us today.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. I very rarely engage in conversations of this deep nature, and it's just been absolutely wonderful.
This was today's dose of badassery from Life Unrestricted. Find the show notes with links to everything we mentioned in this episode over at lifeunrestricted.org. And if this show is making you feel good, awesome, make sure to subscribe and please let others feel good too. By leaving a 5-star review on iTunes, you'll help make this show more visible and therefore more accessible for others. You're the best. Thanks.